So remote, as you said, it's part of the human experience that we need to develop. It's the way that we expand the superorganism. This just gets a little too philosophical, but the superorganism that we used to have when we were in person, remote is what enables that superorganism to transcend geography. And so it's super exciting. All right, guys. First official Remoter podcast. Let's do this. Today is a little bit more philosophical in terms of what the hell is remote? Why do we care about remote? But before that, should we do a quick round of introductions and say who we are, and why is remote important to you? And I vote we start alphabetical with Andres. Go.
I love that. When I was in school, I was one of the first ones because my first name is Andres. My last name is Cahiao with a C. So I'm usually one of the first in the things we do. I'm the co-founder of Torre. Torre is the global network for matching people with jobs. We started with remote jobs in 2018, and we've grown to over 1.4 million professionals all around the world. Over 1,000 companies have used us to find talent. And most importantly, we are the promoters of programmatic recruiting, which is a better way of recruiting, leveraging technology in the entirety of recruiting processes. Now, I just stole Alex's speech, and I'm sorry, Alex, but I had to do it. But we work together. We actually work together. We've been doing so since 2018, and I've had a few other projects. I come from a marketing background, so you'll see me talking a lot because I do like to talk a lot. And I've had a few different businesses before, including an agency and consulting services and so on. Why is remoter important to me? Now, it's important because I've worked remote all of my life, to be honest. I only went to an office, I think, for a year, and I wasn't even there for most of the part I was traveling. And I think that's an important factor, and I think that a lot of people will connect with that. But the most important reason why remote is important to me particularly is because of the opportunities for socioeconomic mobility that it enables. And you would say, well, of course, if you're hiring someone from LATAM with a US salary, of course there's going to be opportunity for them to grow from an economic perspective. But even within the US, people that used to be living in New York, San Francisco with New York or San Francisco salaries that then move to the countryside, that then move to a cheaper place, maybe where their parents are from, or maybe in a town that has better cost of living, that also generates a lot of impact. But not only that, also because when you have more time with your family, when you have more time with your kids, when you have more time with the people that you love, because it's easier for you to be around them, that has a significant impact in people's lives. So we're going to talk all about this, but these are some of the most important reasons why I think remote is not only the future, is the present, and it's very, very important for humanity.
Good. Alex?
Next is yours, Tomas, no? Yours.
Next is me, right? Gutierrez. Yes, yeah, we're not going for Alexander. So
that will have been first. That comes.
That would have been
comes
first.
Before N.
L comes for N. Yeah, and this podcast brought to you by Torre. So my name is Tomas Gutierrez, and I've been doing the remote thing, I want to say, for close to now over 2 decades. And I want to say that we were doing remote when we first had ICQ, when we had the first groups of people. And I've been working in remote environments since I remember doing professional work. There was always somebody that was developing. There was an engineer, a developer that was somewhere else. And so remote has always been a part of my professional journey. And we've had to make do with whatever we had, up to the point that because relationship with Alexander, with other things that we had been doing together, friendship and other projects, we decided to launch Tribe, which is a product for bringing back what we lost when we went remote, rescuing those things that we used to have when we were together in an office in person. And how do we rescue those things so we can bring back those small, high value interactions, those small moments that could change the course of an organization that currently you have to ask somebody, hey, I have a great idea. I know you're triple booked, but can you fit me in for 10 to 20 minutes? We are leaving so much magic on the table because of what we're doing. And then bringing that into why remoter, why are the three of us here? It's because I don't know what the best way to do remote is. I have a framework, but I also know that there's a lot of people, a lot of humans that are trying different things. There's great things that are open source. There's books. Even Andres, you and Alex, you wrote the first book of Remoter, which is the genesis of this whole project, right? So you started with Remoter, the book, which in my framework is the first one. It's on people, on the why for remote. So it was a great starting point. And so this is the evolution of that. So first and foremost, thank you to you two, which you have the domain, you have the idea, and all of these things coming together are allowing us to do this. And 100% what you said, Andres, I think remote is one of the most important ways that we can improve humanity, the existence for as many people as possible. We'll talk about the negatives as well, because it's not all rainbows and unicorns. But
For
that's why.
sure.
That's a little bit of why remote. And I think that whether you are in an office with in a company with multiple offices, that's remote. You need to have some of the same architecture for communication collaboration as you do if you have a base in Mars and a scientist in Earth, and then that's still remote. So remote, as you said, it's part of the human experience that we need to develop. It's the way that we expand the superorganism. This just gets a little too philosophical, but the superorganism that we used to have when we were in person, remote is what enables that superorganism to transcend geography. And so it's super exciting. All right, that's me.
And myself, I'm Alexander Torrenegra, and I started working remotely back in 2002. We were starting a new company, and the only engineer I could think of that I wanted to hire was several countries away. I was in New York City. I had recently migrated to the US, and my best friend from college, which is the person I wanted to work with, he was in Colombia. So it wasn't a choice for me to go remote. It was a necessity because he is the person that I wanted to work with. And back in the day, video conference wasn't a thing. So the only way in which we could communicate was using Yahoo Messenger or MSN Messenger, the audio interfaces that they had. We will also chat to those through those tools. In fact, when those tools were down, we actually had to get calling cards that would allow us to call internationally for a low cost. It was wild. Um, and that company was Voice123. Voice123 was the company that enabled the voiceover industry. Voiceovers are those voices that you get to listen to on movies, video games, apps, TV commercials, etc. It enabled that industry to become remote on its own, meaning before Voice123, the industry used to be primarily based in the US, in New York City, Chicago, and LA. But with Voice123, we enabled that industry to be able to audition remotely and eventually deliver full projects without ever going to an in person recording studio. With that, and visualizing that we're able to revolutionize or at least enable the revolution on that industry, we ended up creating several companies later. One of those is Bunny Studio, which is a company that assembles every single day teams of remote creative professionals, hundreds of times per day, to work together in projects that last from a few minutes to several hours. Then co-founded Torre with Andres, and Thrive, the newest company I've co-founded, very proud of, with Tomas as well. All of them focus on one way or another on remote work. Now, why remote work? For me, it's twofold. One is first principles. Is if you ask if if teamwork were invented today, how would it look? And the answer is unlikely an office setting. The answer is much closer to what we today see as remote work. Now, we call it remote, even though I hate the word remote because we are not really remote. We are a distributed teams. We're a collection of distributed teams. But that's another word. That's a conversation
Well, that's
on
for
its
later.
own,
That's for
right?
later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other reason is because I believe that remote work is crucial for the evolution of the human species, which is also a long conversation to have. Maybe we have time to discuss it today.
Maybe today. And it's great. I was in a meeting last week with these people, older people, and from different, mainly higher socioeconomic background, but older people. And we were trying to do something remote. I love what you just said, because by default we were trying to work over WhatsApp and video calls and other things, and try very hard to not get together. But people didn't know what it was to have a Word document or a Google document and collaborate with comments and edits. And so it brings me back to something that we all need to keep in mind, which is we are at the forefront of this. We are outliers, and most teams, most people have no idea how to even do this, right? I think most teams are doing something that they think is good enough, but it's probably far from what they need to be doing for remote. And that's why 80% of bosses want to go back into the office. And most of the workers that have tried remote, they really don't want to go back into the office full time. And so it's for us, I think it's a dose of humility that there's so many people that don't know how to do this, and we take it for granted every single day. Yeah, just leave me a comment in the Google Doc instead of print this thing out and leave it to me and use the messenger to bring it to my house, right? Like, going a little philosophical, I think, just so that we can also level set what is remote. How do we define remote? Because it's a broad topic, and a lot of people don't know what remote actually means. So what do we think that means?
You know what? I think that there's been a lot of controversy about remote work. I've been speaking with people from all kinds of companies that we work with on this very topic, and I think that the biggest controversy has to do with this whole issue of in the office or not in the office. But I love that in the introduction that you did, Tomas, you said that even within an office, within a campus of buildings, you have to have remote work. And I think that if we start seeing remote work more as the collection of habits and decisions that impact the culture of how we do things, that are first and foremost thinking about the experience of someone that is not physically present, then we can agree that even if you're in an office, even if you're going to an office, you can be working remotely. You can be thinking about remote first, which is something we touch on the book that we wrote with Alex. Um, and so that's something that's beneficial even for the people that like the old school, office building, everybody 8 a.m. or 9 a.m., whatever it is. Even for them, it's going to be beneficial to adopt these things. If you're having a meeting in person and you guys are talking about different kinds of things and making different kinds of decisions and nobody's taking note of what's going on, there is no recording, that is what's going to happen. Well, next week, somebody's going to forget what they're committed to. Next week, somebody's going to think or remember things differently. And this is just a silly example that, for most people, I imagine is not a problem. But reality is that there's still a big percentage of people that have just no idea how to leverage the existing tools of today to be able to work more efficiently and collaborate with others, regardless of where they are presently. But more importantly, to be able to leverage these tools so that work is as productive as possible for us. It doesn't matter if you're in an office or not. You can implement the remote best practices and they will benefit your team's productivity.
100%.
I think that all companies end up becoming remote after they go past a few hundred people at a macro level, right? At a macro level, I mean, there are always going to be communications that happen one way or another digitally, just because you're in different floors, you're in different office buildings, you're in different cities in your company. Uh, so every company that scales eventually is going to develop a hybrid culture of work. And for multiple reasons, hybrid is not good, which that's also a podcast episode of its own. But yeah, all companies end up having to learn how to go remote. So if that's the case, why don't you also go remote at the micro level and not only at the macro level, right? Anyway, I'm getting off topic. The question is, what is remote, right? What is remote for you, Thomas?
Remote for me is how we communicate, collaborate, share presence when we are not together in person. So it's how when it's everything that's outside of the Venn diagram of being together in person to create value or to build something together. I think it's fairly simple for me. And it's very in line with what Andres said. Like all of these tools that we use, all these processes, tools, ways of thinking, culture that are used when we aren't going to be limited by working 100% in person all the time. So it's a huge universe of things, and that's why again we're here to explore all those things. Alex?
You know what's the thing? I was just gonna add on top of that, the biggest issue I think with remote is that it does have second order consequences that require deeper levels of thinking, even at the economic level, right? What I was saying earlier with the whole, U.S. companies hiring people from Latam, it does have significant impact and connotations in the lifestyles of people, but also in the overall economy. And so it becomes this bigger topic than maybe simply, what habits do we have when we communicate and when we collaborate together. It becomes a much bigger thing, and it also impacts people at a personal level. It impacts people psychologically. It impacts the well-being of people. So a simple change in where you work, where you collaborate with others, ends up having all these ramifications that we really haven't had the time as humanity to talk about enough, I think.
Absolutely. No, and I think that's a topic. Like one of the things that I want to cover today is the negatives, because I think we're preaching to the choir. People that are going to be listening to this, ourselves, we love remote. We are doubling down all in on remote, and we can think of a lot of positives. So maybe let's focus on what are the big negatives. And I love where you're coming from, Andres, which is something that I notice whether I'm in South America, whether I'm in parts of Asia, all across the world. What's happening is that there's a huge brain drain, that remote enables the best and the brightest of any geography to remove their brain from the professional market, which means that the best and the brightest aren't going to be available for the best bank of the country to have a good mobile app. And so it's just going to suck, because if you get somebody that knows English enough and is a good enough engineer, fuck it if I'm going to be working in this company, right? And so there are definite negatives, but at the same time, they can earn dollars from that company while living in their home country. Plus and minus, but it's a deep conversation that is not as easy as just being like, yeah, remote is perfect and has no consequences.
But before we get there, I think that we should the Socratic method is not only about questioning the ideas of others, it's also about agreeing on what are the definitions of the terms that are being used on that conversation, right? And if we are going to be talking about remote work, I think it's very important to agree on that question that you brought a moment ago, which is what is remote work? Now, I'm looking here in Wikipedia, and I disagree with Wikipedia. It says that remote work, also called telecommuting, telework, work from home, hybrid work, and other terms, is the practice of working from one's home or another space rather than from an office. And I don't believe that's remote work.
No, that's terrible definition.
It's a terrible definition. We should
Do,
we should we should
do you have
take
editing
over
powers,
Wikipedia.
Alex?
I'm putting it on our action items, like take over Wikipedia page for remote. Like
Do you have
that's
editing
one of our
powers?
goals.
And there are a
Who the
few
fuck wrote
reasons
that?
why I dislike this. First, because am I right now working in an office or a home? What do you think?
It's a home office.
Yes.
It's a home office, right? And I host people here every now and then, right? But it's a home office, right? But it's an office. But not only that, I have many members in my team that work from co-working spaces. Why? Because they don't have a proper setup at home. So, and they prefer to go out, so they have a co-working space. In some cases, they pay for that co-working space. In some cases, we pay for that co-working space. A co-working area is definitely an office space. If you look at a co-working area and you say no, co-working this co-working office is not an office, well, that's a different conversation to have. But a co-working space is an office, and I think that at least what we are trying to do in our company is not how to teach people how to work from home or how to work from the beach or how to work from a car, is how to have a greatly performing distributed team. so that it doesn't matter where you're located, we get to do the best work that we can do and perform as greatly as we can perform. And that might mean you working in a co-working space. That might mean you working in your bedroom with a proper desk setup. That might mean you working
Yep.
out of a coffee shop, etc., etc. So for me, remote work is really the art and science of working distributedly, of working without having to have physical contact or physical interaction with your peers.
There's something that just came up there, and I think it's very important because when you say the words, hey, working remotely, when you think about the topic working remotely or remote work, I think the majority of people, they believe it's is something as simple as working out of your laptop, and that's it. And
Yeah.
so there's while there's an opportunity to overcomplicate remote work with all the entire second order consequences and whatnot, there's also the opportunity to oversimplify it as to working out of your shitty laptop, whatever you want to work out of, and that's also not remote. You shouldn't oversimplify what remote actually is based on what you're saying, Alex. And I actually love that definition. I'm gonna suggest it to the Wikipedia people. Um, it's really about how to do the best work you can regardless of where you are, which is the natural evolution of work. We all agreed during the industrial revolution to go to office spaces because it enabled us to be able to be working together closer to high density, higher density population, closer to our factories, closer to our operations. And that's all great, but humanity has evolved. And the next step of working together, of collaborating together, it already is distributed. It's just that nobody has actually sit down to say, okay, what is the best way to do our best work while distributed? And so I actually think we need to change the name of the podcast. It shouldn't be a podcast on remote work. It should be the podcast on what is next as the best way to work.
No, because we can't do that for marketing. Yes, I agree, and we also
It's
need
gonna
to
be the
jump on the
all in
bandwagon.
remote podcast. All in
Just
remote. There you go.
how to do work correctly, how to do your best work.
Yeah.
But to be then, if we're gonna get fully pedantic, and if we're gonna go down that rabbit hole, we can't just say location independence, because there are trade-offs when you have people that are across sufficient time zones, right? If you have a team that has people in time zones that are greater than 10 hours, and you have many people in time zone A and time zone B, you have to think about what that means. You have to duplicate leadership. You have to have some processes that might be different. And so I think
Not
it's not as
necessarily.
simple as location. Yeah, it depends on what
No,
you're doing. But
I
again,
do. No, I do
we're
agree
gonna
with
get.
location independence. Yeah, we'll get there.
But I think
Here's a
but I
quick
think
thing.
like
Going back to the
it
name of the
depends.
podcast, but going back to the name of the
Yeah.
podcast for a moment, there is a term that I'm sure no one has used. Maybe we can coin it and own it. What about we call the podcast "Future of Work"?
Oh,
Yeah,
nobody's used
the
this. Investors are gonna
Nobody's
love
the,
that
used it.
one. By the way, investors, we're
the
gonna get so much funding.
so there is something interesting because while I believe you can have a high performance team uh, distributed, being remote, you still need the team to have certain closeness in terms of distance to be able to account for a synchronous communication. So for synchronous communication, meaning
Synchronous,
communication in real
yes,
time,
that's
in
right.
addition to asynchronous communication. And I know that not all people that do remote work agree with me on that regard. I believe some people believe that asynchronous is the future of work, meaning you never have to have a real time conversation with another person. I disagree on
Boo.
that for multiple reasons. Looking at you, Andres. But but I would then add to the definition that yes, that's remote work, but the best performing work requires certain closeness in terms of time zones.
Yeah.
You know what the
I,
thing
I,
is? We can all cast opinions on what is best performing work, but in reality, it depends so much on the people that are doing that work and the kind of work that they're doing and the different challenges that they're trying to solve, both at a personal and relationship and technical level. That unless we conduct major studies on all these different variables, all we can do is give opinions. And those opinions may be right or wrong. And you guys will, the listeners will take whatever they want from them.
yes,
Yeah, no,
yes.
no,
But here, hold on. There is one thing, and here we get into Alex. And I were talking about this morning, right? Like science. Do we have longitudinal studies of 100 years from now and knowing what works? And so because we don't have that, we shouldn't put money on a particular horse. That's ridiculous. We have sufficient data and we can make educated bets on certain things. And part of this podcast is the three of us are going to have very differing opinions on many of those things. I happen to be more on Alex's side, but part of what I wanted to bring to the table right now, because we are coming to time, is we don't know. Even within the three of us, we disagree on so many things here. Some remote teams we're 100% asynchronous and we're never going to see each other. And some remote teams we're only going to see each other in 4 to 6 hours of Zoom meetings per day. And that's going to be our remote life. And there's a spectrum in between of infinite ideas, tools, processes.
I think that
we need to table that definition of remote. It's something that we're going to continue evolving as we continue this project.
But one thing we can agree on, I think, is that culture comes down from leadership. I mean, leadership has to set the pace for culture, has to set the tone for culture. And so what is remote will depend on what works for leadership. And I do think there should be a component of democratic alignment of things in terms of the culture of companies, but also it ends up boiling down to what works with the leaders. So in the case of Torre, even though Alex and I have a disagreement, unfortunately, Alex is the CEO and he has more people on his command. And so I have to get aligned. And it's fine. But I do think that what is remote, it ends up boiling down to what works for the leadership of the company. And then, of course, how much effort do they put into building a culture that, while being distributed, working whatever they want to, or they have to, because sometimes you do have to be in a certain place, they are able to do it efficiently, leveraging today's communication tools.
Yeah, and that's why I believe that asynchronous communication in many cases works best for Andres, and that's why he said, no, let's not do a podcast, let's do a blog articles. Boring.
Boring. Okay, Andres, thank you
cheap
for
shot. That was a cheap
volunteering
shot.
on writing. You can volunteer to write. Andres just volunteered to write the blog articles, right? For thought.
Yeah.
I just put them through ChatGPT. I just put this entire conversation through ChatGPT, and that's it. Nobody will read it. It will be the most plain blog post ever. But anyways,
people suck at reading. It's very few people that like reading. We are very privileged. We like writing. We like reading. But the human experience, I would counter.
We did not evolve. We did not evolve to read, right?
We did not evolve to read or to write.
No, to listen and to speak.
To listen and to speak.
Andres did somehow, but no, we didn't. Yeah.
I'll just send you a bunch of voice notes, Alex, instead of writing my next updates for sure. Let's see how that goes.
Okay, so next podcast, Andres, you can just phone in a bunch of messages and we'll just play them between Alex and me, and then you can answer asynchronously.
Yeah, let's see.
We'll wait a couple of hours for you to reply so we can complete the podcast.
But this is part of the conversation. Some things are best done asynchronously, and then some things are best done synchronously, because humans are messy. When we come together, we can ping pong a bunch of ideas in seconds that could change the course of humanity, literally. Versus when you just do that in Notion or asynchronously or voice notes, it's a great yes and I think that's part of what we're trying to discover here, is that it's not a one size fits all. It's not a polarized topic. It's not one silver bullet of this is how you do remote. It's an exploration of this highly complex topic that humanity is just now. We don't even have diapers for this, right? We're still pooping our pants in terms of like what remote is, and we're hopefully going to get diapers, and hopefully we're going to get better at the way that we do this. So I think in order to wrap it up, any thoughts? I think this is great first run at this. I think the idea is to continue with a bunch of topics, discussing the news, discussing Zoom, discussing Elon Musk and Tesla and SpaceX not doing remote, which based on our definition is different. Zoom going back into the office, hybrid. There's so many topics. Q&A from people. But any closing thoughts from you two?
Alex, you started last, so go ahead.
No closing thoughts.
You can record a video message and send it to us later.
Yeah. I have to think about it. I'll get back to you with my closing thoughts.
We can do it asynchronously.
We'll be consuming this asynchronously. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Andres?
No, I think that something that can be very, very useful for people here is not only to bring our opinions into this, but different because companies go through so many different stages. People have so many different challenges they need to solve. Um, Even though Alex and I we work remotely, he's based out of Napa, I'm based out of on an airplane. Um, we we have decided multiple times, especially at the beginning of the relationship and the beginning of the building the business. I moved to San Francisco and I lived in Alex's daughter's bedroom for 6 months just so that we could work together on what we were trying to figure out. So it's not like we are against going to an office. We're not against being in person. We're not against co-working spaces and whatnot. It's more of a matter of we're trying to figure out and we're passionate about figuring out how do we make the best work we can using all of the tools we can. Jumping into a plane is a tool. Getting an office space is a tool.
Yes.
Zoom is a tool. Tribe is a tool. Riverside podcast recording is a tool. And so if we can give people these tools very practically and answer to their existing pains, whatever challenges they're trying to solve. Oh, I'm trying to define the vision for my business, or I'm trying to scale my sales operations, or I'm trying to lean up my operations so I can sell the business. Whatever it is that people are trying to solve for, there is going to be an answer to how can you best do your work in terms of the practices that you use and the culture that you have. And so hopefully throughout this podcast, we'll be able to give some of that to the listeners, both from our stories and our perspectives, but also from guests. I'm going to make sure that we bring some of those.
Yeah, that's right. And you only brought up like 10 different podcast topics within that closing statement. So that was great.
Alex? And if you like the conversation, you want to continue hearing about our thoughts on this topic, please like, subscribe, and leave your comments down here.
There you go.
First time doing that. Did it sound good, no?
It was awful, great. But I like the try. I like the try. It was passionate, which is important.
We're gonna cut
Alex,
that and
the
also
YouTuber.
put it throughout the podcast. All right, team. Thank you very much for this. For
Thank
this
you,
session.
gentlemen.
See you later.